Sorry.
Welcome, everyone, to the January 2nd, 2008. These years just come so fast. Call to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Sylvia.
Mayor Weislegel.
Here.
Council President Garland.
Here.
Councilor Kuiper.
Here.
Councilor Young. Here. Councilor Browse.
Here.
Councilor Griffin.
Here.
Councilor Rosner.
Here.
Thank you.
Approval of agenda. Can I have a motion to approve?
I move we approve the agenda. Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Approval is approved. The agenda has been approved. Consent agenda. We have two items on the consent agenda. The approval of December 19, 2017 City Council meeting minutes. The second item, Resolution 2018-001, appointment of City Council liaison assignments.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Consent agenda has been approved. Citizen comments. Sylvia, do you have request forms?
Mayor and Council, I do not have any forms.
Okay. We have presentations, two tonight. Are either of the Eagle Scouts present? Sometimes their schedule is difficult to connect with what we're doing and when we're doing it, but I would like to recognize them. If they were here, we'd invite them to come up to the microphone and explain what their project was, what led them to that, and how that project benefits from a few to many. And it's great work that these young people do. The first certificate of achievement is presented to Ty, initial B, Dahmer. On behalf of the City of Sherwood and the Sherwood City Council, we congratulate you on your outstanding achievement of attaining the rank of an Eagle Scout. Thank you, Ty. The second certificate of achievement is presented to Jacob K. Ulam on behalf of the City of Sherwood and the City Sherwood Council. We congratulate you on your outstanding achievement of attaining the rank of an Eagle Scout. Jacob, congratulations. And we will thank you, and we will get these certificates to them as soon as possible. Okay, we have new business next. The first item of new business is the selection of council president. Do you wish to make any comments?
Mayor and Council, this is a very normal first meeting agenda item for a new year is the selection of a new council president. Both Josh and Sylvia and I are here to help you with the process. I don't know if, Josh, you want to go through what we talked about in terms of nominations. It's very similar to what you've done to appoint counselors to vacant positions. So with that, I'll let Josh expand.
So unlike appointing
someone to fill a vacancy, there's not actually a process set out in code for this, but we'd recommend you use the same process since you're all very familiar with that at this point, and it seems to work well, which would be calling for nominations. We'd recommend that you ensure that the person who's nominated is willing to accept the nomination, take a call for seconds, and then once you have a list of all the people who have been nominated and seconded, then we can do a vote. If one person gets the majority, that will be the person selected. If not, we can do a runoff from the top two.
And oral votes are,
Oral votes are fine, yes.
okay. Well, the nominations for council president are now open.
I would nominate Sean Garland.
Second.
Are there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Renee Browse. Whoops. Renee Browse.
Second.
Renee Browse has been nominated and seconded. Are there any other nominations? Let's call for a vote. Sylvia?
So Mayor and Council, we're assuming those two nominations are accepting to your nomination? Yes, Councilor Ross, thank you.
Yes.
So all those in favor of Council President Garland continuing as Council President, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. I'm assuming then we have an unanimous nomination and a vote. So Councilor Garland, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks, everyone.
The second item of new business is Resolution 2018-002, authorizing the city manager to execute a master services agreement with the YMCA of the Columbia Willamette. Joe?
Mayor and Council, you have the staff report and the resolution and the most important document, which is the master services agreement that we've negotiated with the Y. I'm going to hit on a few things that I want to highlight in my staff report without reading the staff report, but I think your questions are most important. Staff will be here to answer any questions you have about the proposed agreement with the YMCA. I want to highlight and make sure folks know the YMCA's board has approved this as it exists in front of you. So if you go through a process ultimately and want to change the language or provide some alternative language, that would have to go back to their board for approval. And if we get to that point, we can talk more about the details about that. So very similar to what we did with the health fitness resolution 4 or 5 months ago. We spent most of the last 2 months negotiating with the YMCA as the second rate proposer in the RFP process. The team that negotiated was myself, Josh Soper, Katie Henry, our finance director, Kristen Schweitzer, our community services director, and then Craig Sheldon was engaged at some point of the process when we were talking about maintenance of the facility and long-term responsibilities for the building, which is going on 19 years old now. So it's an aging structure. So we wrapped up those negotiations actually last week. There was a lot of work that went on last week between the YMCA's attorneys and Mr. Soper primarily in terms of language. Our intent was to have that document available on Tuesday. We did not get that accomplished, unfortunately, until early Friday morning when it was released. And I know many of you were still reviewing the document today and had some questions for us. So I guess I want to reiterate, if you need more time as a council, you're not on any clock to make a decision tonight. I've talked with a number of you that have said, if we don't make a decision tonight because we want just some more time to read over the document, is there anything that prevents us from making a decision tonight? And there is nothing that prevents you. You could make the decision in 2 weeks if you want, or you can make it tonight if all your questions are answered. So I want to make that very clear to the council and to the public. So I am recommending as city manager that you approve this contract. I think it is in the best interest of the city of Sherwood to move forward. We've been through a lot, obviously, over the last 6 months related to who is going to operate this facility, and we're at a point with this proposed contract that I think it is in the best interest for the city to move forward with our long-term partner, the YMCA. There are things in here, as I cite in my staff report. I think from an operational management standpoint, we've got 18 years of experience. The YMCA of the Columbia-Willamette has been in existence for 150 years this year in the Portland region. We have a history with this organization, and I think they have the operational and management capability to operate the facility. Financial risk, unlike the health fitness alternative that the council said no to, there is virtually very little financial risk to the city with this proposal. The main difference, you may remember, health fitness was not willing to take on any responsibilities financially if the operations lost money. The YMCA is retaining the commitment they've had for 18 years with the city that they would absorb any losses. That's a significant difference between this proposed contract and the previous proposed contract. A very different scenario from a financial standpoint. And I think that's important to highlight. You may have some questions specifically about financial obligations in the contract, but overall there's very, very little risk to the city financially to continue with this operator. I touched upon in my staff report the need to rebuild the partnership. There's a lot of language in there in that proposed agreement, responsibilities, more lines of communication to rebuild the partnership. I think we have actually gone through a period of time where we've drifted apart for a variety of reasons, and we need to come back together as partners. And that's really going to take place on a person-to-person basis. There is a council liaison that is in the agreement, which we haven't had in a while. That person will be attending meetings for the local board of managers and having communication at that level. Kristen Schweitzer, as our community services director, has not been actively engaged with the YMCA over the last few years. She will be actively engaged, working with the new executive director when they hire somebody to do the Sherwood branch. So there's a lot of language and a lot of time was spent about how do we rebuild that partnership. And it has to happen at a whole variety of levels. It can't just be the city manager meeting with the executive director of the Y on a bi-monthly basis, and now we're partners again. There's some trust issues. There's some hurt feelings, for lack of a better term, that need to be rebuilt. And that needs to happen regardless of what's in the contract. But I think we spent a lot of time about how do we rebuild that partnership. And I think that's important to highlight in your decision making. The term of the agreement, it's a 5-year agreement with the opportunity to continue for another 5 years. So it's essentially a 10-year agreement. Originally, it was going to start, when we started negotiation, it was going to start at the end of the current agreement, which is November 2018, but we proposed to the why if we have a good agreement that's better than the agreement we have now, why should we wait to start it in 10 or 11 months? We should start it now. And the YMCA agreed with that. So it's a little bit longer than 10 years, I think 10 years and 10 months potentially for its full fruition. So there's a lot more details in the agreement. There may be a lot of questions you have that depending on the type of question, and maybe an answer I can provide. It may be a legal question that Josh will provide. It could be something from a financial standpoint that Katie will provide. But my team's here to answer any questions you might have to help you in your decision-making process. But we are recommending that you ultimately approve this contract.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Could we just jump into this?
Yeah, you want to dig in?
Go ahead, Russ.
You want to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I want to start with Katie. So in the Section 8, the net proceeds section, Article C, page 5 of this, 25 of the staff report. Is that right, the big numbers?
Yeah.
25.
Have in the packet.
25 of the packet. Yes, 5 of the contract. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so net proceeds will be retained for the benefit of the Sherwood YMCA. So all of the net proceeds will stay here in our community.
In the local YMCA.
In the local YMCA. And what, I know it might be spelled out here, but for the benefit of the public, what is our mechanism to make sure that that in fact is going to be the case?
So we will have the quarterly reports, first of all, where we are looking at what's coming in, what's going out, looking at budget and all of that. And then at the end of the year, those net proceeds, it is a number. And so we will be going back and forth with the YMCA to discuss how those proceeds are going to be used. And there is a point in the contract that says that no other transfers can happen from the local YMCA to other areas. So they can't then put a line item in that's a transfer out from the Sherwood YMCA to another branch or to corporate or, whatever it is for those net proceeds or for a portion of them. They have to stay there. And then we are watching on a quarterly basis for all of the ins and outs.
Okay. I have a follow-up question. Is that okay? This is Article D on the next page, top of the next page. So I know that after the 11%, has been retained by the YMCA, Columbia Willamette, what is it says here that written plans for the net proceeds will be given to the city and that we will collaborate in the allocation and prioritizing of the use of those net proceeds. So is that a sit down? Is that after you receive how much extra there was? They come to you and you have a meeting and there's the written plan. Is that how do you envision, how is that extra money going to get spent?
It goes along with the collaboration that Joe was just talking about in having this back and forth conversation. And we wanted to make sure that the contract wasn't dictating this document will be done, signed, and back and forth, because it didn't give enough fluidity and enough availability for us to see what does the community need, what does the local Y need at any given point in time. So at the end of a budget year, so the books are closed and you budgeted to have at the end a surplus of $10,000, you ended up with $25,000, then we literally sit down, and when I say we, it involves finance, it involves the CEO, it involves the city manager, it involves Kristen, and we sit down and the YMCA proposes a plan, a written plan, but they propose that plan, and we literally sit down and we discuss the plan and come to a mutual agreement as to how these funds will be spent among us. That's literally how it happens, and it's not a resolution, it's not a signed contract. And maybe Joe has additional comments on that.
No, I think Katie covered it well. And this is where I'm going to use the example. The Park and Rec Advisory Committee currently has no idea what goes on at the Y. Doesn't know what the Y's programs are unless they're members. If they're a member, they may know. Doesn't know anything about their finances, has no idea how the Y is doing positively or negatively on a year-to-year basis. That's got to change. As the city grows and folks come to the city with recreational desires, wants, things like that, they need to know how are things going at the Y from a programming standpoint, from a financial standpoint, so they need to get engaged more than they've been in the past. And if they are engaged and knowledgeable, and the council is engaged and knowledgeable, and there's good communication, and it's a partnership again, those decision-making issues about net proceeds will be fairly easy to do because people will be informed about how things are going. So it sets a path, in my opinion, to rebuild communication lines that have been not as strong as they need to be. Those decisions will happen. They're not going to make $200,000. We're not going. That's not the situation if you look at their numbers historically. But they may make more than what their budget is. And those decisions, they want the city during our negotiations. They want the input from the city about how those proceeds should be spent. I think for far too long we were separate. City was over here, the Y was over here. City manager and the CEO would meet, but no one else knew what was going on. That's got to change, and I cannot say that that is critical to rebuilding the partnership. It cannot just be myself and Mark Burris meeting on a routine basis, talking about how things are going. It has to happen at a whole variety of levels. The community needs to be engaged. And if that doesn't happen, we're not going to be successful in rebuilding that partnership. And that's one aspect, is how does any additional net proceeds get decided in terms of how to be spent. If those communication channels are improved and we kind of understand and respect each other and know how things are going, those are going to be easy decisions. Because again, I don't believe we're going to talk hundreds of thousands of dollars. It will probably be, oh wow, we had a good year, we have $20,000 where we thought we had $10,000. How should that money be spent? And it should be collaboration.
So I do have a follow-up question on that. Just because of my experience being on the Parks and Recreation Board way back when, I was also on the board, the YMCA board. So there was that sort of zipper approach, connections
Yes.
at all levels. What I don't see on section 14 under the coordination between parties, I see the executive director to the community services director and so forth and so on, but I don't see one component of that sort of zipper approach, and that is a representative from maybe the Parks and Rec Board. I see the executive director coming to the Parks and Recreation Board to speak, but there's not that sort of embedded person from Parks and Rec Board as a representative maybe on the YMCA Board of Managers or attending the Board of Managers meeting so they can bring that sort of institutional knowledge on the board.
Do you see the council liaison?
I see the council
Position
liaison playing that role more importantly than a park and rec advisory, and maybe your council liaison person should be the same
Agreed.
liaison to your
Yeah.
park and rec committee.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
we talked at length with folks from the Y about not designating spots on their board of managers. Their board of managers is their own. That's a YMCA.
Sure, but maybe just a representative from the
Could
city.
certainly have a representative. I think starting to identify slots on their board, we don't think that that's a successful or an approach to take. So I think if you wanted to potentially add language that somehow requires someone from the Park and Rec Board to go to their meetings, you could do that.
I think we should just ensure that from the city's standpoint that we have somebody who, like the liaison to the Parks and Recreation Board, also be the liaison to
Yes.
the Y. That
Or,
should
you know,
work.
the way it's set up right now is one is to the Park and Rec Board, one is to the YMCA, and I'm the backup for her. I don't know if you're the backup for me or not, but I mean, we could work it out so that not one
Yeah.
person is saddled with all of that responsibility.
Okay.
So Councilor Kuiper, we specified some lines. We did not want to get into, quite honestly, that level of detail.
Well, I think slots, no, I think you're right. That's getting into, their pot, and we've got our pot over here and stuff, and,
Where's Parks and Rec?
there.
Okay.
Well, we don't have the YMCA liaison listed.
It's on
Oh,
there.
there it is. Whoa, there it is. Okay.
Councilor Young.
Okay, there we go.
But we can have,
So
that's
just to
certainly a
add
discussion
some
we can have behind the
continuity
scenes. but-
there definitely needs to be some continuity.
The new sheet that's part of our.
Oh, okay.
We
Thank
did
you.
just approve it, but
Thanks, Mike.
it can be
It
amended.
can be amended at any point.
So I like the thinking, though. Yeah.
So I have a couple just quick technical question for Katie. Going back to the section on net proceeds, section 8, paragraph E on page 25. When they're calculating the net proceeds, it makes a reference to GAAP accounting practices. Are they required to follow GAAP? And where I'm concerned here is if they make a capital investment, are they going to depreciate that capital over time in terms of calculating net proceeds, or do they have an option on how they do that?
So the net proceeds are calculated on a cash basis. They do have depreciation, and they do so they do their books for GAAP purposes. But when we're talking about net proceeds, we are talking about cash basis.
It is a cash basis, okay. And then on the 11% management fee this may be not for Katie, but for the city manager, is that what's included in that management fee consistent with the original proposal that the YMCA put forward?
I can actually answer
Go ahead,
that.
Katie.
Yeah.
So yes, it is.
Okay.
It is consistent with that. There haven't been any changes to what's included in that.
Great.
And just for clarity, that's actually a reduction compared to the current agreement? The percentage?
In a percentage, but not in the services that's provided
Correct.
under
Correct.
the management fee.
I have a follow-up on that one. I was just curious why we didn't spell out what that 11% included. I thought we were going to clarify that.
The language we added to clarify was the last sentence that says no other transfers of funds from Sherwood branch revenue to the YMCA-CW or other branches is permitted. So 11% is the maximum amount that can be transferred to YMCA-CW
Regardless,
Central,
so it
regardless
doesn't-
of what it's for.
No matter what. Okay.
Right. That's kind of coming at the same issue from a different direction. Yeah.
So the other thing is that it's in financial terms, it's an overhead. So when they're calculating this, it applies to all of the YMCA's, all of the centers of similar type. So all of the child cares have one amount, and all of the fitness centers have another amount, and the camps would have another amount, and they based on an allocation base. And so that amount each year, either each year or every 2 years, depending on the organization, they will recalculate and determine what that allocation percentage should be. So in other words, it could be 9%, it could be 10%. The contract gives us a maximum that it cannot exceed 11%, so that if they do the calculation and they end up finding that year our piece should be 14%, we have this safeguard saying that, okay, we have the contract to maximize it at 11%. But as far as what's included in that, it's a standard. These are the items that are for overall that benefit all the different organizations. So it's not like a picking and choosing of what goes in there. It's a calculation that's done for all the centers.
So very
across the
similar
area.
to the current contract that has a max of 15%,
But right
but they
now,
haven't been charging us that for quite some years. Okay.
And that's the reduction that I'm comparing what's proposed in this contract versus what's in the current contract.
I had a quick question. Same page as page 28, section 13, co-branding, section or letter B. Just wondering on the logistics on how that would work, and this is for reference to people out there, about the signage, website, publications, about a co-branding between the YMCA and the city. How does that work? Who would be managing the changing to the logo? Who would be paying for any updates to logos?
Well, it depends specifically on what you're talking about. So let's talk about signage.
Okay.
Right now in the current city budget, there's no money allocated to do any new signage on the building. That's why you notice in there that I have, or the city has till November 1st for any site signage improvements. What will probably be in my budget proposal is an allocation to do some additional signage on the facility, that if it goes through the process of getting approved by you, ultimately through the budget, after July 1st, then I'd have money available to add some additional signage. One thing that we've talked about as an example of that with the Y is the existing sign on the outside of the building would stay the same. It says, welcome to the, I believe, regional Sherwood Family YMCA. I don't have that exactly correct, but it has the Y logo on it and the city's logo. Obviously, for some folks, we've learned people don't realize that that building's owned by the city. Even though the city logo's on there, and you and I and most people that are in city government would know that, lots of new folks come to town. A lot of people don't know that, and they don't jump to that conclusion. So I've talked with the Y about putting an additional signage underneath in smaller letters that just basically says a City of Sherwood owned facility or a City of Sherwood owned recreational facility, something that clearly identifies when people walk into that building that, hey, this is a building that's owned by the city. We can do things on the doors together. There's a lot of co-branding that we can really instill in people that this is a facility that is a public building that is operated by the Y. A lot of folks in the last year have told me, why are you messing with the Y? In the sense, they don't understand that it's owned by the city. They don't understand that relationship. So we've talked at length about how do we instill that so people, it's almost over their head in terms of, yeah, we get it. We know it's owned by the city in a sense, without taking away from their branding, okay? Because the Y has a brand, and it's an important brand to them. So we're putting language in here to try to collaborate again, to come up with ideas. Some of those we've come up with already. There may be things that we can do together that we haven't thought of because we haven't been collaborating. That reinforces that. We've talked about doing, I think I've shared this with most of the counselors. West Lynn puts out a publication 3 or 4 times a year with all the different types of recreational, the senior center, youth sports, this wonderful document for their residents. And we've talked about doing that. Well, if we do that, we can insert in through that some programming from the Y to, again, kind of instill that this is a partnership, folks. It isn't a standalone Y that's only doing its own thing as a Y. It's a partner with the city of Sherwood. So that's the kind of co-branding that we've talked about. How do we develop that? Simple things like making sure there's a link from the city webpage to the YMCA's Sherwood branch. Okay, there's a lot of little things we can do that don't cost money that we haven't done because we've been focused on trying to get this contract negotiated that we're planning on doing in the next year. And the Y has been very supportive of that, along with the idea that there's a limit to that. Because they're part of a national association, and they have a brand, and they have programming that has responsibilities and ties and regulations in terms of how they promote their programs and things like that. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, Counselor.
It does. I just, and I'm sure it's something that, the language is in here. It means we're going to move forward in doing that. And I know that, Kristen or Joe or you or whoever is going to actually work with the YMCA to do that. I just know I've worked for a previous corporation that was bought out by a larger corporation. Sure. And I know that it's surprising how many things have a logo on them.
Yes.
And you find these, pencils and sticky notes and stuff. And so you get through all your building and you figure out what that is. So just logistically, I guess that was my question on how that would work. And
your question about who should pay to put additional signage to the building, that, in my opinion, is the city's responsibility.
Makes sense.
Which is what you say in your staff report.
Right.
Yes.
It's in there. When I had a conversation with Joe earlier today, it was about not just the cost of this, but the vision of, well, who gets to decide? I mean, co-branding to me is a marketing thing. So, we don't want just City of Sherwood slapped all over thing. Take the Public Works stencil and spray paint black or something. We don't want that. So I guess that's going to rest right on your shoulders, Kristen, to come up with a genius marketing plan that the Y loves and the City of Sherwood can be proud of. Right? That's going to be part of because I love the Y, and I think I love the fact that the city owns that building. I love the partnership. When I moved here 20 years ago, that was one of the reasons we moved to Sherwood, because of that unique partnership. And we've really enjoyed all 20 years of it. And I think it's great that we're coming back together and becoming partners more again, at least, written down. But I'd like to see, kind of the Together We Stand, I don't know, little superhero music playing in the lobby as you walk in. Can you just take care of all that? That would be...
Just volunteered to be on that.
Yeah. That's right. Whatever, sorry.
And I don't know if you get very far.
I think it's going to take some time to figure out.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily plan on going in and redoing the logo and changing everything that
Right,
has
and that's
the
not
Y
what I meant,
brand on
right.
it and coming up with one that incorporates the city and has the Y in there. We're not trying to take away
Right.
from what they have going on. We're just trying to make sure that people know it's a city-owned
Right.
facility. So
how
can we do that without
thoughtfully.
totally disrupting everything
Right.
and having it cost $100,000?
Right.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. I mean, I think the YMCA logo is recognized very widely. So
Right.
yeah, I'm not in any way, like you said, making it a silhouette of the city of Sherwood with a Y on top of it or anything like that. So yeah, don't mess with what works.
Wait, that has
I just think
potential, doesn't it?
it's important, though, that we have people in our community understand, so that when we do go out, say for a bond expansion or for other things that require public input and public thought, group thinking, that everyone does understand that it's a building that's owned by the city that needs to be expanded. How do we do that? It's not the YMCA's responsibility to do that. So I think that's really important for future messaging.
Yeah, I agree.
And the language and the discussion around this co-branding really is one of the many lessons out of this whole past year or more. Quite honestly, I'm surprised, but I'm the city manager, so of course I know that building's owned by the city. But I've met many people in town, friends that are like, oh, we own that? I didn't know that. I thought it was just a Y. So obviously that has not sunk in, and we need to together work at that. And it should be something that is celebrated because it is unique.
So in that vein, the fact that the city does own the building and people who do understand that, the two questions that I see crop up, whether it be social media or bending the ear, are two things. One was the idea of selling the facility to the Y discussed. And second, instead of the specified amount of $25,000 going into a reserved account, was there discussion of a lease payment? So for the public's education, can you respond to those two
Councilor Brous,
questions?
we had some at the beginning of the negotiation, we talked about that as a concept. The Y was not significantly interested in pursuing that at this point. They really were interested in coming up with a new operating agreement or a new agreement to move forward. That does not mean that they're not interested at some point. There is some language that says if the city wants to sell the building, that basically they would have the first chance to buy the building. That's important to them. But those discussions didn't go very far after those initial conversations, to answer your question.
And then the second part of that question about why we decided to go the reserved fund versus having them pay a lease.
So I'm going to actually have Josh maybe chime in a little bit on the difference between lease and an operating agreement. Because I think there was some language in the past 18 years where the Y identified something, a payment, as a lease payment. It was never a lease payment. They were making a contribution to pay down the debt, but they used the term lease, and then that got paid off, and there's been some folks in town asking, where's our lease payment? Well, there's never been a lease payment because it's never been a lease. This is not a lease. If this was a lease, it would have been a lot simpler to implement because we wouldn't have co-branding and we wouldn't have all these relationships. Basically, we would lease the building to them and they could operate it the way they'd want. The city doesn't dictate to Smockville Brewhouse what's on their menu. They get to decide what's on their menu and hopefully, succeed or fail depending on the food and the service they provide. So that's a lease. This is not a lease. This is a service agreement between the city and a provider that, like I said, has many, many years of experience of providing these type of services that the city does not have internally.
And I would add to that because we're actually getting the best of both worlds. Because if it truly was a lease, we would have very little control, to your point, Joe, what happens in that facility. But a true operating agreement, we would take on financial risk. So we're getting an operating agreement where we have control, like we can have some say on how high the rate increases are for the public, but we're not taking on the financial risk. So it's actually kind of the best of both worlds in my mind.
So Josh,
I don't really have anything to add to that. Yeah.
I want to give you the opportunity. But I think it's an important question, Councilor Brous, because there's still this confusion, where's our lease payment? We've never had a lease payment because it's never been a lease.
Which is no different than when we were negotiating with Health Fitness. We weren't asking them for a lease payment either.
No.
Nor was that in their contract.
No.
So this is no different. They are operating this facility on behalf of the city because we aren't operating it ourselves.
Correct.
And taking a loss.
Correct.
Okay, so I have a couple of other clarifying questions.
Please.
Those are the two big ones, though, just for the sake of the public. So on page 24, it is, I better put my glasses on. It is Roman numeral 6, keeping the detailed log. Does de minimis mean the daily maintenance stuff, is that what that means, Mr. Attorney?
Minimis is a Latin term and a legal term, and it just means so minor to be inconsequential.
Okay.
So, we don't expect them to keep a log of the fact that they wiped a smudge off of the window.
So we're really looking at the big ticket maintenance items.
Exactly.
Okay. Next question on page, maybe it was the same. Page 25, letter C. So where it talks about parties acknowledge the YMCA of CW periodically participates in activities, blah, 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 blah. Do we have any idea of what this means? Because it says down here at the bottom, let's see, I'll just read the whole thing. The parties acknowledge that the YMCA CW periodically participates in activities in the city of Sherwood that are not held on site at the facility, and agree that any revenue from off-site activities will be credited on Sherwood YMCA accounting reports to the extent staff expenses for the off-site activities are debited to the Sherwood YMCA. What exactly are we referring to there?
So if there was an off-site activity such as, and I don't know the specific activities, but say we had a child's activity that was in a park and there was a scavenger hunt.
Okay.
And each child had to pay $3 to participate, and they had to have 3 staff to run the event. If we're going to pay the 3 staff from that event, then we're requiring that they also credit the Sherwood facility for any revenue that they take in during that event, even though it's not held at the Y itself.
Gotcha. Okay. I think the rest of it's just about section A. It's the scope of work, but I can ask that offline.
Okay. Any other council comments?
I had just a clarifying question. I'm not sure that I understand what this means. Page 42, section 43, the section on visual art. I'm just not sure. Is that statues, art? Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I got that question from some other directions too. So there's a federal law that basically provides what's called, what do they call that?
What is a written waiver of moral rights?
Moral
What
rights.
does
That's
that
the term I was
mean?
looking for, moral rights. So an artist has moral rights in their work of art. And so most commonly where you're going to see this come into play is a mural, right? An artist paints a beautiful mural on a wall. They have a moral right in that piece of artwork. Then later someone comes along and they want to paint over that wall or tear down that wall. That artist has to waive those rights in order for us to be able to do that. And so that's why you condition the installation of the mural on the waiver of those rights up front. So you don't come up with a situation 20 years down the road where you're trying to remodel a building and there's a mural on the wall and you can't do it.
So basically, we may allow the mural, but we can do whatever we want after it's
Right.
Got it.
Okay, so I have, I don't know if this would be ex parte contact or not. I'll just ask. My Girl Scout troop did a mural about 10 years ago at the YMCA. And would we have to give permission if the Y were to?
I cannot provide legal advice to your Girl Scout.
All 13 Girl Scouts.
Yeah, that sounds like a different place at a different time.
Is the mural still there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have a clarifying question. It's actually something that's not in the contract, but it's something that we talked about a lot during the RFP process. And there was a lot of concern amongst the public, especially when we were negotiating with Health Fitness, that they were just going to raise our rates, and they were going to, couldn't afford them and whatnot. My understanding is we have some commitment from the YMCA that they don't intend on raising any rates in the next year.
That's correct, Counselor. And I looped back with Mark Burris at the Y again today. They have no plans to implement a rate increase in 2018. That was not part of their original proposal. They were not proposing to hold rates frozen for 2018, but their intent is not to raise rates.
But we had talked about it a lot in the proposals,
I think we talked a lot
keeping the
about
rates
it
static
in the health fitness
for the first year.
proposal. I think there was some discussion, and I believe Health Fitness, if I recall correctly, committed to holding rates the same for a year.
Well, I know there's some emails that we've gotten that our expectations of one should be the same as the other, and so I'm happy to hear that there's a commitment that, at least for the year. I mean, we all realize you can't hold rates forever. I mean, expenses go up.
Well, and their costs are going up,
Yeah.
like many businesses with the Oregon Minimum Wage Act and things like that, those costs are going to continue to go up. And at a point, they're going to have to implement some kind of rate increase. We spent more time talking about what about significant rate increases? And that, I think we talked more about what was the level where the city would get engaged in terms of a rate increase, and that's where we landed with the 10%. If they wanted to raise their basic rates 10% or more, the city would have to agree to that. Anything below 10% is really their business model, and if they raise their rates too high and they start losing, members, they're not going to be able to operate financially, and they have an incentive to finish in the black. They don't have the city to fall back on.
Just to clarify that is on page 25, section 7, letter B for anybody at home, is that there is the 10%, that any 10%
And that's
increase.
new language. We did not have that kind of language in our current agreement.
Just want to make sure that was clear, that everybody understood that is actually in the agreement.
And I just wanted to squash any rumors that tomorrow rates are going to be raised.
That's correct.
Just because it doesn't say that they can't in our contract, but we have, during bringing our communications back together, that you've had conversations with, and we trust that the Y is going to hold to their word.
And for the purposes of just clarifying for the public who are watching or may watch this video later, we're preserving the discounts for Sherwood residents.
Correct.
Yes. Right.
And the scholarship program for people that can't necessarily
Based
afford.
on need, right?
Based on,
Yep.
right.
Please.
Yep, I do have a follow-up question regarding payment for third-party use of the facility. This would be section 15, starting on page 29, or excuse me, page 9 of 25 of the contract. 29 in our packet. On section 15D, for uses of the facility by third parties not specifically permitted herein, and that generally means, I'm assuming, to be parties that are not affiliated directly with the Y, like members. So for nonprofit groups like Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, and the like, that are not necessarily affiliated by membership with the Y, would they be subject to the same rate schedule? And this question might be for Katie or Kristen. If it goes to the community services director for evaluation to determine whether or not they can meet at the Y, is that how that would work for nonprofit groups?
I might have to refer back to Josh, because we talked about this a little bit at our last meeting, but we weren't going to manage or have anything to do with their room rental rates. We did talk about, and so we wouldn't have the final say in that.
Okay.
What we did discuss is trying to have some consistency so that you're not paying one thing when you go to the art center and one thing when you go to the senior center and then nothing when you're going to the Y, and that we wanted to establish some sort of a base level or consistency so that you are potentially paying for room usage for nonprofits regardless of where you're going, so that, because it is a city-owned facility, so we didn't want people to feel like you can go to this city-owned facility and you don't have to pay, but if you go over here, you have to pay.
But there may be
I don't
groups.
think that we established necessarily what that was, but I wasn't involved in the final draft, so I'm not sure.
But there are groups, well, likely, I don't know, maybe, groups that are nonprofit that are meeting at the YMCA right now, that if the contract, when it goes into effect, will need to approach you, the city, through the Y for approval to continue to meet there if they're not directly affiliated with the Y. Is that how that works?
There's two different issues here. There's the fee.
Right.
Okay, and there
And
needs
then
to be
there's
a
a
fee.
permission. Mm-hmm.
Because right now, there's no fee for that
Understood.
community room.
Yeah, I get that.
So what we've told our partners is you need to charge a comparable fee because it's a city-owned building.
Mm-hmm.
You keep the money. You're not going to, send us $15 or something for a fee kind of thing. That will go back into your ongoing business operations. And we haven't determined what that is at this point, but that's a collaboration between the Y and probably Kristen and myself to say there's parity. That's all we're trying to create, is some sense of parity. And then the issue about use of the facility is what we've been doing on an ongoing basis. It's just that it's shifting to Kristen rather than me. So I will occasionally get an email from the Y saying, we have this group that wants to use the facility on this date for this purpose. Does the city approve? And I send I think 99% of the time I say, yes, no problem, thank you. So it will still be that. The room usage for like the community room is not the real issue. There's the issue of let's rent the building out on a Saturday morning from 8 till noon for this group so they can pay this kind of money, and then the members can't use the Y. So that's why, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But we want to prevent that potential from not happening. And again, it's about communication. It's not about controlling what happens. It's about knowing what's going on in a city-owned building.
I was just thinking about the nonprofit groups.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify a little bit more on that point. So we have under section 15, there's subsection C and D.
Yeah.
Subsection C lists a long list of permitted types of uses by outside groups.
Right.
I haven't recently reviewed the current users of these facilities. I would imagine most, if not all, are going to fall under that section C. And so the city's not going to have.
That's a birthday party, so they don't get permission from the city currently to have a birthday party. That's part of their ongoing business operations. They just rent the room for a birthday party.
Right, and a long list of other things too. And for those, the city's not involved. They just have to charge a fee that's comparable to what we would charge for a comparable facility.
That's actually where my question was arising too.
Okay.
That in C, 15C, if you read it, it doesn't include nonprofits that are not associated with the YMCA. Birthday parties for YMCA members or what have you, but it doesn't, there's nothing in that language that talks about other groups that are not affiliated with the YMCA as nonprofits meeting. That's why I just wanted to clarify.
And I think
for D,
depending on the nature of the nonprofit and the membership of that nonprofit, the type of meetings they're conducting, that may still fall under subsection C.
okay.
So we have, for example, health and wellness related seminars, ad hoc member uses such as groups of members meeting in facility rooms for social discussions, that sort of thing. So only if it does not fall within C would we then look at D, which is where the city is going to be involved in making a decision about rates and who can use the facility.
And that's where I had Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts circled under D.
Toastmasters, all those kinds of
Toastmasters, yeah,
So
would be D.
So Josh, if something does fall into D, is that approval process and the criteria we use to approve similar or the same as what we do for other city facilities when people are coming in to use those facilities? I mean, is there consistency between
Right,
the two?
I understand what you're saying. I don't think necessarily it would have to be because it's a different, the nature of the facility is different. Right, so we have meeting facilities in the city that are designed specifically to be used for meetings. These are facilities that are designed to be used for this recreation center, right? And so the criteria wouldn't necessarily have to be the same for who we allow and what we don't allow, what rates we charge for those. But I think there may be some lack of clarity still on subsection C. I think it's broader than maybe it's being read. So we have, for example, all program-related meetings and uses, any similar event where the core purpose is to serve the community. I mean, it's a very broad definition under subsection C. So I really envision subsection D being triggered infrequently.
Correct. Because it's being triggered it's not in the current language this way, it's being triggered infrequently currently. I don't get an email from the Y every day about this use. It's maybe 2 or 3 times a month. And I think in the last year, I've probably said no maybe once, if at all. It's communication. Hey, we have this group that wants to use this room. Does the city have, it's not in our core mission, does the city have any problem with that? And the answer usually is no. Thank you for letting us know. And it's as simple as an email back and forth. And right now, that email back and forth is between me and the Y, and in the future, if you approve this agreement, it will be between Kristen and the Y. And then in your quarterly report currently that you receive from the Y, it lists all the users that I've approved. So that will continue. So if you want to know who's using the facility that meets this in the future, that will be in the quarterly report.
So I've been on council for a year now. I don't think I've ever seen a quarterly report. So how are we going to make sure council actually sees those?
They've been forwarded to council, so because they come in and I'll look into it.
Yeah,
I've actually gone and looked and like this is going to council because I know some people have said it's not going to council. So I don't know why you have not gotten it.
That would be weird.
You should have gotten
Open everything.
3 or 4 in your tenure, counselor. Because those reports have actually, I think, increased in complexity and what they're reporting on.
Any other comments? Anything else? I had one I wanted to add. There was discussion about city connection that way, Y connection our way, and two points I wanted to add. Craig Sheldon from Public Works is also a player, maybe in a different way than Kristen is, but that's a very tangible, more facility-oriented kind of connection, and that's, I think that's an essential and an important one also. And this one, it's hard to keep a straight face with. There's an annual walkthrough by this very city council. So anything that might possibly be missed, it would be picked up by this group, I'm sure. It's in there. It's in there somewhere. I read that.
I actually highlighted it. I thought that was good.
And actually, I've had a couple conversations with individual counselors today. That's going to happen sooner once you, assuming that you approve this.
Yeah, that was my vote.
We're going to have that walkthrough pretty quickly.
Good. That sounds good. We can have some citizen comments if there are some. Sylvia, have you anything that way? Okay. If that be the case, can we have a motion?
I'll move to approve Resolution 2018-002, authorizing the city manager to execute a master services agreement with the YMCA of the Columbia Willamette.
And a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all. City manager report.
Mayor and Council, the only thing I want to remind everyone who's here or watching at home, this Friday is the deadline for anyone that is interested in running in March. We have another election for the mayor's seat, and the two council seats that are currently occupied by Tim Rosner and Russell Griffin. Those seats will be on the ballot in March. And the deadline to file for election is this Friday at 5 p.m. And if anyone has questions, they can contact Sylvia Murphy, our city recorder, who will be acting as our elections official. So I want to remind people about that deadline.
Thank you.
Any questions for myself or other department heads that are here? We also have an executive session after your regular meeting, just as a reminder.
Council announcements.
Do you mind if you want to go?
I'm on the right.
Go for it.
No, I just have a short one.
Okay.
I'm hoping to attend the Parks Rec board on Monday. So depending on how the assignments stay the way they are, I'll actually have a meeting to attend. I'm very excited about it. That's it.
Whoa. Please.
I don't have any announcements since the last meeting because it was the holiday season, so none of my assignments. But I did want to thank staff, Joe and Josh, Katie and Kristen and Craig, for all their hard work on this contract with the YMCA. I am very excited that the partnership's going to continue, and I understand that the negotiations went smoothly. And yeah, so I just appreciate all the hard work. I know the last 4 or 5 months has just been grueling, and I'm glad to get this done and moving forward with a great partnership. So thank you all.
Good.
All right. So the tickets are on sale now for the Sherwood Center for the Arts upcoming play, The Odd Couple. There is, interestingly, this year is a male version and a female version. Go to sherwoodarts.org for tickets. I will, in full disclosure, say that my wife is a cast member of the female version. I'm very excited to see her perform in that. I am saying this because I enjoy the Sherwood Foundation for the Arts, not because she made me say this. But please go see that. It's actually going to be at the Art Center this year. So again, it's 19th, 20th, and 27th for the male version, 20th, 26th, and 27th for the female version. And the SFA does actually have a bundle deal that if you buy both, you get a discount on the tickets. So they're both very funny. I've heard a couple of the lines, and it is a very funny play. And I guess I will kind of follow up what Joe was saying earlier about the filing deadline for the mayor and council positions. I will be, or have submitted my paperwork for mayor, so I'll be running for mayor, so stay tuned. Thanks.
Well, Happy New Year to everyone here and everyone out in internet land, TV land. Happy New Year, City of Sherwood community. The only announcement I have is that the Interact Club, which is a student version of Rotary, which is a service organization, is having a talent show this Saturday at the Sherwood Center for the Arts at 7 p.m. Tickets are $10 for adults and I think $5 for students. And all the proceeds go to charity. So if you're interested in going, it's going to be a lot of fun. I hear some really great youth talent out there, and come and support the Interact Club and get your money to charity. So thank you.
Ditto on what Councilor Kuiper said. There also will be some adult talent, I think.
Oh.
I've heard of at least one gig. Not me, but somebody else. Also, Happy New Year to all of you, and hope you have a successful, happy, and safe New Year. And I didn't have any assignments this week, so I'm done.
I didn't have any assignments either, but I did want to echo what Kim was talking about, Councilor Young. I'm very appreciative of the staff and the work they've gone through over the last, it seems like 2 years, but I think it's only been since August, in working through the renewing this operating agreement for the YMCA. It's what got me involved, and a big reason that I'm sitting up here, and it's really wonderful to see this come to such a positive outcome. That's it.
And I would like to add the Happy New Year to everyone that's here, everyone that's watching, and everyone that makes Sherwood a wonderful place to be. It warms the heart. And thank you. We're adjourned.
Right.